Yo, what's up, everybody? In this video, I want to talk to you guys about a couple build-related things in Smite 2. For those of you who watch my live stream, you probably have heard me talk about these things in recent days, but I figured it's always nice to publish something and have it be a little more well-articulated than I can do on stream when I'm, multitasking, playing, and reading chat and, doing whatever else. So this probably will be a rant video, as every video I ever make will be, because I love to rant and get off topic. But I'm going to go over two topics, unless I go way too long on the first one, which is going to be Lifebinder and why I think Midlaners should be buying it. And the second one is hybrid characters in Smite 2 and how to build them. We'll get to that later. If I have it in this video, I will go ahead and timestamp it for you or add chapters, all that type of stuff. So first, let's go over Lifebinder. So you may have seen in my active item video, or just if you're watching, playing the game, whatever, you probably have seen Lifebinder. I'd imagine for a lot of you who haven't been playing for Smite 2 for very long, it's probably pretty difficult to understand why this item is so good. So I'm going to give a quick kind of rundown of it here. So if you don't know what it does at all, it gives 35 intelligence. This is fairly low. If you look at items with intelligence, this is 2,400 gold. So if you look at like Cronus Pendant, it has more. Obshard has more. This is an auto attack item, so it's a little bit different. Spear of Deso has 90 compared to 35. Poly has 80. Bloodbound Book has 60. Divine has 80 for less gold. So it's pretty low. excuse my coughing. Pretty low on the intelligence. It does give 350 max health, which is actually on the very high end of health, right? You have a lot of 300 health items. Items like Circes have 400, 400 on Mystical Mail, 400 in Hussars. These items are all more expensive, so in terms of health that you're getting for the price, it's pretty much the highest one in the game, or, it's up there. And then it gives 3 health regen. If you're a Smite 1 player, this is 3 health per second, but if you want it to be HP 5, it's 15 HP 5. Really good amount. The active is the reason the item is good. So the first thing about this is the cooldown. It's 15 seconds, which means it's up very often. The reason this is so good is because I would encourage you, especially if you're learning how to use active items, use them more often than you think you should, especially with an item like Lifebinder. So for example, let's say we're in duo lane. Let's say a wave is meeting. You should either Lifebinder the wave to clear it faster, or you could Lifebinder the enemy god. Maybe you're an Afro or something like that, and you can like Lifebinder them, kiss them, proc the Lifebinder. We'll go over what it does in a second. Just do some bonus damage, help you trading. It'll be up for a wave, and then you can go to a jungle camp. It'll be up for that, and then when you come back to the next wave, it'll be up. So normally the way you want to farm in Smite is you want to go wave, camp, wave, camp, wave, camp. That's the most efficient you can be, generally speaking. Waves are every 30 seconds, which means you get a Lifebinder on the wave, and then you get a Lifebinder between the wave. So every single time you're doing something, you have a Lifebinder up. It does damage based on your level, so it's 125 flat, 5 per level, which means at level 1, it's 130 damage. It also will mark enemies, so it puts this little green heart above them. And if you consume that mark, it will shield and heal you for about the same amount it does damage. For some reason, it's 125 plus 5 on the damage, but 130 plus 5 on the heal and the shield. So just 5 extra. So let's say I'm low. I'll go tank a tower shot, right? I'm level 1 in this scenario. So I'm low, I tank a tower shot, boom, I throw that, that did 90 damage, hit this, 130 plus 130. So I got 260 health here, and then I dealt, about 90 here. So I just had a 350 health swing at level 1, right? So if we're full trading to the death, this is worth 350 health. If I have 1,000 health and they have 1,000 health, 35% of our health in a swing is pretty significant, right? They can be used for sustain. It can be used to peel your allies. If you throw this on an enemy god, don't hit them. Let your hunter hit them. Boom, they get the heal. They get the shield. Can be really good for peel. Okay. So that's what Lifebinder does. That's why people buy it on support. It makes sense, right? We're going to dive into the numbers a little bit. So incoming Google Doc. The spreadsheet's all white. So in case you're in a very dark room, we're going to give you a blinding warning right now for a flashbang, okay? I'm going to count it down. 3, 2, 1. Here we go. I actually clicked the wrong tab. Boom. There you go. Okay. So here's what we're going over in this. Here is every standard mid lane character in the game. So I did not include characters who are... I could have included like Neith, for example, who has hybrid scaling, and I chose not to. And I chose not to include like auto attack characters. So a character like Soul. I thought about not including Zeus. What I'm looking for is purely traditional mages that you would most often just want to build high intelligence on, right? You wouldn't really consider a strength build. You wouldn't consider an auto attack build. You are only building for high intelligence. That's how your damage comes from. That's the God sample that I'm using, because it should also be the most extreme case against my argument, and I'll explain in a second. This is their passive. So if their passive has damage scaling on it, which Agni's does, it's 6% per tick. 6 ticks, 36%. And then there's some other things here, like Aphrodite has damage increase in her kit if she ults, technically, right? If she ults, she gains increased damage. Baron, depending on Hysteria, he does more damage to people. Poseidon, depending on Tide. Vulcan, this is off of his mods. He can get 40% scaling. This is actually going up to 60 next patch, I think. No, it's 40, I think, on the next patch. I don't remember. It's getting buffed next patch. And then Zeus has it off of auto attacks. And then here's the scaling for their ability 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is their alt. This is the total of their first through third abilities. This is the total percent scaling in their entire kit. And here's some notes. Okay, just trying to tell you what each column is, and it'll make more sense in a second. So what I'm going through here, what I'm trying to test, is how much damage would you need to gain from intelligence to equal the damage that the Lifebinder proc is giving you. So I'm not including the healing or the shielding that it's giving you, and I'm not including the fact that it gives you health and health regen. Purely damage, how much intelligence would you need from another item or in the rest of your build to make up for going Lifebinder first item in mid lane? Okay? That's what I'm trying to test. So the reason we have two different totals is because this affects your farming as well in the early game, which is normally your first through third abilities. Generally speaking, most people don't alt camps. Me personally, I stay alting camps. I will gladly alt a wave as Kakakin. I will gladly alt a buff as Kakakin to speed up farm, or Vulcan, or whoever. I actually think it's a pretty good habit for people to learn when that is good. But that's maybe another topic for another video. The second thing would be total percent scale. So I would include the passive on like Agni, for example. And I would try to conditionally include some of these notes, which I'll go over. And this is just how much total scaling they have in their kit. So the more scaling a character has, the less intelligence they would need to build to make up for the Lifebinder damage, if that makes sense, right? If Lifebinder does 100 damage and you have 1,000% scaling, you only need to build 10 intelligence and then hit your entire kit, and then you've done the damage, right? Whereas if you had 1% scaling, or I mean, you can just make it really extreme. If you have 0% scaling in your kit, you can't. It's insurmountable. The 100 damage is invaluable. You know, if you had 1, it would take, what is that, 1,000, whatever it is. So, anyways, you got it. I'll go over some notes here just to contextualize it. Maybe we'll come back to this at the end of it when I talk about which characters I would and wouldn't build it on. So, like, Agni, I'm assuming you only get 1 tick of your 1. So you bomb, place your 1, there's a tick, plus the detonate damage, boom. Then I'm assuming on your dash, they don't stand in the dash the entire time. So like if you dash through somebody and then stun them standing on top of your dash, that will add ticks to your dash. I'm going to assume that's not the case just because it makes it harder to calculate. I did include every single hit of the ult though, so this is assuming you hit every ability. For Aphrodite, she has different scaling on her back off, depending on if it's you hitting them or if it's your soulmate hitting them. And she also has bonus damage if both targets hit them. That one's not super realistic. The self-scaling is 85, the soulmate is 70. More often it'll be your soulmate hitting them with back off. I went ahead and favored it on her a little bit, so I used 80. And then it's really hard to value her ult and her damage increase. So I went ahead and assumed that when you cooldown reset with your ult, with your birds, So you birds, all birds. I'm going to assume you hit your birds. So that's where I'll give her some bonus scaling. There's some other ones here, like Baron. I'm assuming that you hit both parts of your 1 every single time. Hades, I'm assuming you always get an extra hit of your Blight every time. Hecate, I tried to average her 2. So I have this little thing down here for Hecate 2, where Hecate has increased scaling based off of how many abilities are used inside of her 2. That scaling is 120% from just like 10% per ability, 12 abilities, 120%. If you had no scaling on Hecate, it would do 70 damage. And then if you full charged her 2, it would do 154 damage. Because it's adding scale. It adds to the base damage and to the scaling. If you had 100 power, it would do 110, and then it would do 242. So you can see the scaling numbers here. The difference between these two is 40% scaling, and the difference between like 40% of this 100 power is 40 damage. 110 minus 70 is 40. Boom. And then same thing here, 88% scaling total. So between 40 and 88, I gave Hecate 60% scaling, which would assume that you do like your 1-3, for example. A lot of the times you just fire your 2 right away, or you 2-1-2, you know? So this is actually pretty generous in my opinion. Kalkin, same thing. I'm not assuming they stand in your entire tornado. If they did, this number would go up. Nuwa, I was generous on assuming that every single clay soldier would hit, and you get to detonate them and hit them with the shining metal, and they get hit by the fog and take another tick of it, and they get hit by, you know, everything. Then same thing with Poseidon. I assumed that you don't have attack speed items. You hit all of your autos because you're a god, or most of your autos, and of those autos you hit both parts of the 2. Sometimes you hit none of them. Same thing with Ra. I assumed that you get your 2 damage on them and you hit every single laser. This is a ton of scaling if you hit everything. But yeah, I tried to give every single god the benefit of the doubt. I tried to make the scenario as favorable for them as possible, okay? So now, what I'm doing is I'm taking Lifebinder, and here's how much damage Lifebinder does based on your level. So level 1, it's 125 plus 5 per level. Your level 1, 125 plus 5 is 130. At level 7, it does 160. At level 12, it does 185. At level 20, it does 225. I'm arguing you should go Lifebinder as your first item as a mid laner. So I'm going to use level 7. You will probably finish this item at level 5, but you won't get your second item until probably like level 9. So I'm taking the averages of that range, and then obviously throughout the game you're continuing to get value from this item, and it does more damage and more damage and more damage. So 160 damage, it was just a cleaner round number that I could use. So now what we are trying to find is how much intelligence do you need from this scaling on each god to do 160 damage in your kit. So if you take every single character here, same list as the gods above, here is the scaling that they would need from their 1 through 3, or here's how much intelligence they would need. So if you're Agni, right, you have 381% scaling. In order for you to get 160, or I'm sorry, for 150% scaling on the 1 through 3, in order for you to get 160 damage out of the 150, you would need 107 intelligence. Here's an example. I have 107 int, boom, times 1.5, that's 150% scaling. Bam, 160.5. I rounded on all of these values, so that's why it's 160.5. So, Lifebinder, in terms of damage, is worth 107 intelligence. Just the proc. If you add in the base, which is 35 right here, that's how much intelligence Lifebinder gives. Lifebinder is worth 142 intelligence to Agni if he's not alting. If you include his alt, it's only worth 42 instead of this 107. If you hit all 3 bombs, you're using all 3 bombs, you're unloading the clip, and then it's still a 77 intelligence item. Okay? So you can look for yourself and contextualize this how you want. Let's take a character like Mori, because she's the most egregious example. Okay? Mori doesn't have scaling on her 3, and her alt turns her into another character. So all she's got is her 1 and 2. So her 1 and her 2 both have 90% scaling, which is really high. It's 180% total. However, 180% scaling, in order to get 160 damage out of that, you need 89 int. Okay? So Lifebinder is worth 89 plus 35. It's a 124 intelligence item for Mori. in terms of how much damage it is adding to her kit. You would need to build a full, like a full Dreamer's Idol, almost, right? Dreamer's Idol is 140 intelligence. That's a 3.7k item. If you built that, you would barely be doing more damage than just Mori with a Lifebinder if you hit your 1 and your 2. Your 1, 2, and 1. It's an extremely valuable item. And again, I'm not even including the health. I'm not including the HP 5 or HP second, whatever you want to say. So yeah, you can go through it on every character. For example, like, who's another good one? Let's say Hecate, right? You're not alting camps as Hecate ever. So including her whole kit, I think doesn't make a ton of sense in terms of how much value it would have. So when you're just farming, you're poking as Hecate the whole game, this item is worth like 109 intelligence. If you were to go in game and look at an item and you were building this, like if you were building a mage, right? And you were looking and you were Hecate and you were like, oh, I wonder what item I want to build. I can build Divine. That is 80 int, 5 pen. I can build Chronos Pennant. That's a lot of cooldown. It's not that much power. If you saw 105 intelligence on this item, 105 intelligence, 350 health, 3 health regen, and the proc, like that can heal and shield you, ignore the damage because we baked that in. It would be, everyone would be screaming it's the most broken item to ever exist. You know, like it's insane the amount that this item gives. Like this is 120 intelligence. If you were to go back to this, like this chart, just look at how there's a good amount of characters here, like Hades, whoever, you know. This item is just worth a lot in terms of damage. The amount of intelligence you need in your kit, even a character like Anubis, he has the most scaling in the game. He's over 1,000% if you hit everything. If you hit every tick of your 1, every tick of your 3, every tick of your alt, he has over 1,000% scaling. It's still worth 70 intelligence on this character. So 70 intelligence to be able to basically be unkillable in your first item. Junglers can't gank you. You poke trade better. You have better sustain. You heal better. I feel like that's still really good. And that's the character that it should be the worst on, in theory. So yeah, you guys can all make your own judgment. In my opinion, Lifebinder is... I think it's the best item in the game currently, or one of them. I think it's like that item. Heartseeker, Gargoyle is still really good. Stampede's still really good. It's definitely one of the best items in the game. And I feel like mid laners should be buying it. Because I feel like, especially after the patch, so there's a patch coming out that is going to give Spear of Desolation 10 cooldown rate, I believe. If you're able to go something like this in your first 2 items, I would reverse the order of this. You kind of have everything. You have health, you have regen, you have mana from your starter items, you have pen, you have cooldown from this. Like, you're getting a ton of power, or a ton of intelligence, rather. You kind of get everything. And a lot of characters combo with this really easily. So let's say, you know, Baron's a really, you know, simple one. Let's say I'm level 3 for the sake of this. I didn't mean to press that button. You know, I can root, and then off of my root, I can 2 Lifebinder 1. And I just hit everything, and boom, I just throw in an extra 100 damage on that really quick. Boom, no problem. Just a quick extra 100 damage in my kit. Makes me safer, makes me harder to kill, all that good stuff. I'll finish off with this by contextualizing a few characters. So, by the numbers, some of these gods look better and have more value from this item than you would think. I probably wouldn't build Lifebinder on Kukulkan ever, just because of his passive scaling off of mana. You should just build Book of Thoth every game. And I think you should build Polynomicon every game on him too. And I think those are your 2 items more often than not in your first 2. So I think that build is just, he's just got better options because he has an alternate way to scale power. I would say very similarly, maybe a character like, there's one more I wanted to mention. A character like Zeus, I think he scales better off auto attacking currently. Lifebinder can be really good on Zeus. If I was going to build a health item on Zeus though, I think what I would rather do is I'd rather go a greedier damage item somewhere in here. So let's say I go like Deso. On the new patch, I think Deso will be a meta mage item. You're going to have this in every build, most likely, just because it gives you every stat, and it's fairly cheap. I think a better option would be Jade Scepter. It kind of fits his kit better. He struggles against characters, mostly junglers, who can like get on top of him and one-tap him. If you're able to have like You know, let's say a jungler goes on you, you don't have your relic, the ability to just knock them off of you completely and then drop your kit on them, you know, ult them, one them, detonate them, all of that stuff, I think is really valuable for him. So I'd rather have that than Lifebinder, generally speaking. So yeah, there's a few exceptions to this, but hopefully you guys get the point. I think this item is broken. I think it sounds kind of quirky. It sounds kind of weird and unconventional, so I think a lot of people don't do it. But I really think this is broken. You can see for yourself when you're farming. Just trust me, just use it off cooldown. Like, come out of base, go clear camp, drop your Lifebinder. Oh, actually, there's a couple more things I did. Oh, I knew it was going to be a rant video. What a beautiful day. Clearing 2 camps with different sets of spells. Okay, this is something I want to talk about. Not every character has 2 abilities that clear very well. So let's say you are a... What are we doing here? Let's say you're an Anubis, maybe. Okay. He has the most damage in the game in his kit, so if it should be good for anyone, it should be good for him. So let's just go to like level 6. And here's how I'm putting my points. Boom. So let's say I have to clear this camp. If I'm clearing this camp as Anubis, and I have, you know, you can have Sands or Conduit. I would probably go Conduit. And then let's say I have Lifebinder. You go up to a camp, and you want to clear it, and you want it, and now you can auto-attack it down and finish it. Well, now if you have back harpies or something you want to do, you don't want to wait 7 seconds to have your 1 come up. So what you can do instead is you can kind of stagger your farm and use your weaker ability with a Lifebinder, and now suddenly your clear is just more efficient. So I can't do it in here because I don't have 2 camps that I can clear at the same time. But if you were looking at a 2-camp window, if you have to wait for your main cooldown to be up twice, use it on 1 camp, wait, use it on the other camp, you're going to take a lot longer than somebody who can use their main ability on this camp and then use their secondary or tertiary abilities plus a Lifebinder on the other camp. It kind of splits up your damage. It's almost like you have a 4th ability to farm with in a lot of ways. So that's one thing I would mention. Another thing I would mention is kind of what I said earlier, like wave, camp, rinse, repeat. Just use it off cooldown. If you are one-shotting the wave, just throw it at the enemy. Just hit them with it. Just do poke with it. You don't even have to hit them with anything else. Just toss it at them. Who cares? Same thing. The biggest argument against what I'm saying here and against these numbers are Rod of Tahuti, Dreamer's Idol, Archmage's Gem. Okay? I'm going to knock out a little bit of this. I think Archmage's Gem is kind of bad in terms of a starter item. I think there's a lot of times where it can be better for your character to build a 3k pot than it is to build Archmage's Gem. There's a couple reasons for this. One, a 3k pot will generally add... So Archmage's Gem is 40% scaling that you're basically adding to your kit once every 20 seconds. A 3k pot would be adding that intelligence to every single ability. So if you're a high scaling character, adding your 120 intelligence on a character like Anubis, compare the 40% scaling to all of these abilities, right? You're going to get more out of the... Unless your abilities are less than 40% scaling, you're getting more from the 3k pot. Obviously, the starter upgrade is half as expensive, so you're going to have to multiply that by 2. But you get what I'm saying. 3k pots being able to stack and the way it interacts with your kit, I think in a lot of ways can be better than Archmage's. If you're a poke mage, if you're a Vulcan, you're a Hecate, you're spamming abilities all the time. So a 20-second internal cooldown kind of sucks on Archmage's. So that's one argument. Other argument would be Dreamer's Idol. It's a really long active cooldown, and it's a really expensive item. I don't even think it's a meta pick to build this item. I think it's actually a little bit low on intelligence for what it should be. So these two I don't think are too big of a concern. Rod of Tahuti is meta. You should have this in every single mage build. Anytime you're building full intelligence, you should have Rod of Tahuti. These numbers instantly get worse when you have Rod of Tahuti because you are losing that 20% increase. Because this is, in theory, how much it's adding. It's not realized in the proc, right? Or it's not realized in actuality. It's baked into the proc. So your intelligence, or your Rod of Tahuti proc, rather, passive, is not increasing the damage of your Lifebinder, Whereas if you did have this amount of intelligence in your build on your first item, it would increase the Rod of Tahuti. My argument against that would be that while that's true, I wouldn't base your first item off of your fifth item. Power spikes are really important. Being able to be stronger in the early game and to be more efficient with your farm gets you ahead. Getting you ahead in your build, in your levels, will ultimately kill people more than having a slightly more mathematically efficient build. In most cases, the game isn't played on paper, right? You're playing it in the game. So while you could have a more efficient build with Rod of Tahuti that gains, 17 more intelligence in your full build that translates to this amount of damage, while that all sounds fine and good, what about all of the times where you had to back in a bad spot and lose farm because you didn't have health regen, or you died because you didn't have the health from Lifebinder, or you didn't save one of your teammates, or you didn't win a poke trade, or you didn't clear as quickly, so you lost some creeps under your tower? Like, so many things can happen throughout the course of the game that can add up. Being more efficient, being quicker, being more effective over the long run is going to be more valuable. I'm actually going to split this up. Maybe I'll just drop both these videos at the same time, but I've ranted for nearly 30 minutes about this. I'm going to go into the hybrid builds and I'll upload that. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.